Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to make the Tuscan Moon Shawl, which is a free pattern you'll find on Moogly. Please go to the link in the description. There you'll find a link out to the written pattern, as well as all the supplies you need, and both the right and left-handed video tutorials. For this pattern, we will need 2 balls of Red Heart Colorscape. This is the Shanghai colorway, but there are lots of beautiful colors to choose from. You'll also need a USN or 9mm hook. This one is by Furls, and some stitch markers. My favorites are by Clover. Here to the left, you can see a beautiful picture of the finished Tuscan Moon Shawl, and that's what I'm going to be demonstrating today. The finished shawl blocks out to about 64 inches across at the top and about 21.5 inches deep, and uses a stitch multiple of 10 plus 14. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here we have the small swatch that I made when I was figuring out how to work this stitch pattern. Some of you might recognize it from the Tuscan Sun Wrap, which is also a free pattern on Moogly, which has a rectangle shape. However, I had to figure out how to do the decreases to make this triangle shape, because as you can see here, hopefully, this pattern is actually worked from the top down. So we start at the wide point and work our way down to a point. I know you might be spotting that little string here. Like I say, this is the swatch where I was figuring things out, so it wasn't perfect, but it gives you an idea of what we're going to be making today, which will show you how we have the main rows and then how we decrease on down to our point. So let's pull up some yarn and make those stitches. All right, to begin the Tuscan Moon Shawl, you need to start with a chain of 145. That is a stitch multiple of 10 plus 15. Now, for this purpose of this video, I'm going to make a much smaller one, so I'm just starting with 45 stitches, or 45 chains rather, in my chain here. Now, as soon as you've got all 145 chains made for your own shawl, what I want you to do is pick up a couple of your stitch markers here, and we're going to go ahead and mark a couple stitches right now, a couple of these chains, and it will help us out a lot later. The first thing we're going to do is place a marker in the 3rd chain from the hook. So we count back. We don't count the chain that's active. Well, 1, 2, 3, and put a stitch marker right there. There we are. And then we also want to put a stitch marker in the 5th chain from the hook. So that was the 3rd, easy enough. 4 and 5 right there. And these will just help us as we assemble and finish off. I shouldn't say assemble, not really assembly, but when we finish it off, these will help us out quite a bit. So get that loop back on our hook here, and we're ready to start crocheting. Now we're going to start with a double crochet in the 10th chain from the hook. Luckily, we've got that 5th one marked, so we can just count out from there. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now I like to work into the back hump of the chain, but you can work into the top 2 loops if you prefer. I just think this gives a nice finished product. So I'm going into that 10th chain from the hook, and I'm just making a double crochet, like so. After that, we begin the stitch repeat that will take us almost all the way across that first row. We chain 2, 1, 2, then skip 4 chains. So this chain does want to twist a little bit, so you want to take your time and make sure to untwist it as you work into it. So we'll skip 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and in that 5th one, there we go, get it untwisted. I'll get my hook in there. There we are. Tighten up my yarn, and then I can pull up my stitch and make a double crochet, and then I'm going to chain 4 and go right back into that same chain. So there's a chain of 4, get it straightened out again here, and then go back for a double crochet right into that same exact chain, like so. Then we chain 2 again, 1, 2, skip 4 more chains, and work another double crochet. And that is our repeat. So to start it again, let's do it together. We're going to start with, sorry about that, the clicking from the little stitch markers rubbing on the table here. We're going to start again with a chain 2, 1, 2. Then I'm going to skip the next 4 chains, like so, and then go into the next chain here for a double crochet, followed by chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then double crochet back in that same chain. Then we chain 2, 1, 2, skip 4 chains, Get them untwisted here a little bit. There we go. And then double crochet in the next one. Now you'll keep doing that same repeat all the way across your first row until you have just 5 chains left. I'm making, like I said, just a little small sample here, so I've only got one more repeat to do, so let's go ahead and do it together. Chain 2, turn around here, skip the next 4 chains, double crochet in the next one, and then of course chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, double crochet back in that same chain, and then chain 2, and skip 4 and double crochet in the next one. Now at this point you should have 5 chains left once you've gone all the way across with these repeats right here, and that's what I've got here. So now I'm just going to go ahead and chain 2, skip these skip the next 4 chains and just work a double crochet in the very last chain, like so. So pull my hook out here and we can take a look at row 1 when it's all finished. It's a little bit wide for our little table here, but you can see we've got what looks like right here. If we look at those stitch markers, you can see this is going to count as a double crochet. So we've got a double crochet, the V-stitch, double crochet, V-stitch, double crochet, V-stitch, and that would be the repeat across, double crochet, V-stitch, double crochet, V-stitch, until you get to the end here where you've got double crochet and then another double crochet. And you can see how this starts pulling in and creating that nice triangle shape for our shawl. So let's go ahead and begin row 2. To begin row 2, I'm going to chain 1, of course turn to go back the other way, or turn and then chain 1, whichever you prefer. Then work a single crochet right in the very first stitch, like so. Then we're going to single crochet in the next chain 2 space. So you don't have to work directly into those chains, we just go right into that space, pull up a loop, and make a single crochet. Then we are going to single crochet in the next double crochet, and then we're ready to begin our repeats that will take us across. We're going to work 2 single crochets in the next chain 2 space, so 1, 2, then skip this next double crochet and work 5 single crochets into the chain 4 space. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then we skip this double crochet. So we skip the double crochets that are in the V, come to the next chain space, a single crochet 2 again. There we go. Straighten out my yarn a little bit. Then we do single crochet in the top of the lonely double crochet, the one that's all by itself. Then we're back at a chain 2 space. So we make 2 more single crochets in there. Alrighty. Let me pull up just a little bit more yarn. It's getting a little tight and twisted here for me. There we go. Okay, and now we're back at another one of those V stitches, that big V. So we skip this double crochet and work 5 single crochets right into that chain 4 space. So 3, 4, and 5. Skip that second double crochet of the V and work 2 single crochets in the next chain 2 space. 1, 2, single crochet in the top of the double crochet. Then we're back at a chain 2 space, so 2 more single crochets in there. And as you can see, we're just going to continue that on across all the way until we get just about to the end here. So when you get to your last V stitch, that's when you want to start paying more attention. Work 5 single crochets in that last chain 4 space here. You need a little bit more yarn. You can see this row goes pretty quickly, so I'm just running right through the yarn. There we are, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Skip that half of the V-stitch there, that second double crochet, and now we're going to go ahead and work 2 single crochets in this chain 2 space, and a single crochet in the top of this lonely double crochet, And then in this very last stitch here, this is where our stitch markers are coming in handy. This one down here we'll get to when we work our border at the end, but this one up here represents the top of a final double crochet. So in this chain 2 space, so to speak, these 2 stitches right here, we're just going to work 1 single crochet there, like so, and then we work 1 single crochet right into that marked stitch. So at this point, if it's easier, you can go ahead and take the stitch marker out, or you can leave it, it's up to you. But that is like the top of our double crochet, so that mirrors what we had at the beginning. If you'll remember, at the very beginning of row 2, we had a single crochet in the top of that first a single crochet in the top of the double crochet, and just 1 single crochet in that chain 2 space. So that's what we've echoed there, was just 1 in that chain 2 space and a single crochet in the top of what's acting as our double crochet there. So with that, we're ready to begin row 3. To begin row 3, we're going to begin with a chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to go ahead and turn to work back the other direction. Now, in this case, usually when you work a chain 3 at the beginning of a row like this, you might think it's going to count as a double crochet, and ours kind of does, but we're not going to treat this as a stitch. We're just going to use it as a turning chain. After we've made that, what we're going to do is work a double crochet in the next stitch in the previous double crochet. So we skip the next one. Let me start that again. We chain 3, skip the next stitch, and work a double crochet in the stitch after that, like so. Now, this is the stitch we're going to go ahead and put our next stitch marker in. There we go. So I'll just put a stitch marker right in the top of that double crochet we just made, because this will be the last stitch we'll work into when we come back the other direction. After that, we skip 2 more stitches, so those would be the ones worked into that chain 2 space, and then we're going to work a cluster stitch in the next 5 stitches. Those are the 5 single crochets worked into the chain 4 space. Now, a cluster stitch isn't always one particular thing. It can change depending on the pattern. So for this pattern, a cluster stitch is it's basically a double crochet 2 together, all worked into 1 stitch. So let's make that together. I'm going to yarn over, going to that first of the 5 single crochets worked into the chain 4 space there. And I start my double crochet, but I'm going to stop with 2 loops left on the hook, yarn over again, go back into that same stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and then when I have 3 loops left on the hook, I will yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So for the purposes of the Tuscan Moon Shawl, that's a cluster. So we're going to do that in each one of these single crochets that is worked into the chain 4 space. So we should have 5 total. So there's 1, go into the next stitch, and do it again. Go to the next stitch and do it again. So if you've made double crochet 2 together decreases before, it's basically the exact same thing, only we're not decreasing because we're working both legs, so to speak, into 1 stitch. So get all the way across here, and we will have our 5 cluster stitches made. There we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then after that, we skip the next 2 stitches that are worked into the chain space and work a double crochet into the next stitch. So you can see how this is coming together here. We've got double crochets worked right on top of double crochets, and we've got our clusters worked on top of our V-stitch. We're working into the single crochets of row 2, but you can see how they line up a little bit. So after that, we're ready to jump all the way over here. We're going to skip those 2 stitches and work our cluster stitches into the single crochets of this next V. So I'm going to just go ahead and work 5 more cluster stitches here, and then I will work a double crochet in the top of the next double crochet. So I think you see how this row is worked, so I will meet you at almost at the end of row 3. We want to keep working until we just have 3 stitches remaining. So that's the point. I'll see you next. Okay, here you can see I've got an almost finished row 3, and you can see how the stitch pattern is starting to line up. We've got our double crochets right on top of our double crochets and our cluster stitches on top of our V stitches. Now, you're going to keep doing this, like I said, all the way across your shawl until you get to the point where you've got just 3 stitches left here. And that's, of course, after you've skipped these 2. So after you've made your last set of 5 clusters, the repeat says skip these next 2 stitches, and then there's 3 stitches left. So that's these 3 stitches right here. Now this is going to be probably the trickiest stitch of the whole pattern, but it's not too bad, and I'll take you through it right now. You'll only find this stitch at the end of the row 3 repeats, and it's a double crochet, treble crochet 2 together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to yarn over, as for a double crochet and go into that next stitch, that second to the last double crochet right here, or the single crochet that's worked into it, of course. And I'm going to make my double crochet until I've got 2 loops left on the hook, just like a normal decrease. But now I'm going to yarn over twice, 1, 2, and I'm going to skip the next stitch, and in the very last stitch, I'm going to start a treble crochet stitch. So I'll just go in there, pull up a loop, like so, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2 again, and then as soon as we've got just 3 loops left on the hook, that's when we yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So that's a double crochet, treble crochet, 2 together. And this is our last stitch. And I hope you can see then why we had that chain 3 that we don't count as a stitch. That chain 3 plus that first double crochet is kind of the way to mirror that double crochet, treble crochet, 2 together here at the end. So with that, we're done with row 3 and ready to begin row 4. Okay, so to begin row 4, we're going to start with a chain 1. And of course, turn to work back the other way here. There we are. And then I'm going to single crochet in the first stitch because yes, this is going to be another single crochet row. So after that, we are going to chain 1, skip the next cluster stitch. So we just want to skip right on over that cluster, and we want to put a single crochet right in between the 2 stitches. Now there's no chain 1 in there. We're just going to go right between the 2 clusters with our hook, pull up a loop, and single crochet. Then we chain 1 again and go between the next 2 clusters. So we're not working into the clusters at all, we're working between them. I'm just going to continue doing that all the way across here till I've got just 1 cluster left, like so. And then I'm going to chain 1, work between the cluster and the double crochet stitch, like so. Then I am going to single crochet right in that double crochet. Then I'm going to single crochet again between that double crochet and the first cluster of this grouping. And that's our basic repeat. Now the big difference up here up front is that I did not single crochet between our decrease and our first cluster. I skipped right on over that. But until we get to the end, we're going to always be working between those. So I've got my single crochet worked into the double crochet, my single crochet worked between those 2 stitches, and then we're ready again to start with the chain 1, work between the clusters, chain 1, go between the clusters for a single crochet, chain 1, between the clusters again, chain 1, between the clusters, chain 1, between the cluster and the single double crochet, go into the double crochet, go between the double crochet and the next set of clusters. So that is our repeat, but we're going to go ahead, since I've just got my little swatch here, and finish it off together. You'll of course do this section several more times for your own shawl. Chain 1, skip the next cluster, go between the clusters, chain 1, skip the next cluster and go between, chain 1, skip the next cluster, chain 1, skip the next cluster, chain 1, and then here we are right at the tail end here. So at this point we've got our chain 1, but we're going to skip this cluster, but we're not going to work between this cluster and this stitch right here. This is our very last stitch. So after I've chained 1, I'm just going to go ahead and work a single crochet right into the top of that marked stitch right there. And that is the end of row 4. Okay, so before I begin row 5, I'm going to go ahead and take this little stitch marker out because I don't need it anymore, but I'll need it again in a minute. To begin row 5, I'm going to turn, and I'm not going to chain at all. Instead, I am going to slip stitch in the first 6 stitches. So you want to go ahead and start right with that very first one right there. Oops, I dropped my loop right off my hook. So just go right in there and pull up a loop. So we're going to count our chain 1 spaces as stitches here in terms of our slip stitches. So that's 1. Then we go into that chain 1 space for 2. And then to the next stitch for 3. To the chain 1 stitch, or chain 1 space rather, for 4. The next stitch for 5. And then into the next chain 1 stitch here, chain 1 space, keep saying stitch, for our 6th one. There we go. Now this should land us right in the center, right above that center cluster of our first set of 5. So that's how you know you've landed in the right spot there. After we've got our 6 slip stitches, then we are going to go ahead and chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is where we're going to pick up that stitch marker again, and I want you to put it in the third of the chains you just made. So I've got it a little twisted here. There we go. 1, 2, 3. So that's where we want to put our, and that straightened out there, put our stitch marker right in that third chain of the 5 we just made. And that will, oops, there we go. That way that will mark that as the top of our first double crochet, and then here we have a chain 2 space. So then we're ready to begin crocheting the rest of the row. Get it all straightened out here. There we go. I wanted to twist around a little bit on me. So to continue from here, we are going to skip the next 3 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, which puts us right on top of that next double crochet there. So in that one, we'll work a double crochet. Then from there, we chain 2, 1, 2, skip the next 3 single crochets, 1, 2, 3, and work a double crochet, chain 4, double crochet in the next chain 1 space. Again, this puts us right on top of the center of the next set of clusters. So that's where we have our next double crochet, chain 4, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And then double crochet right back into that chain 1 space. Now you may have picked up, this is basically our row 1 repeat. It's a little different because we're not working into the chain this time, but we're getting set up for our next repeat of the pattern. So let's continue working across. Let me pull up a little bit more yarn here. There we go. Isn't this pretty? This yarn is just so pretty. It's, again, Red Heart Colorscape. Definitely check that out. It's available all over the place. All right, so we chain 2 again, and then we can skip our next. Basically, we're just hopping over to that. Look for that next double crochet that stands alone and work right into the single crochet that's on top of that. Chain 2 again, and then you know we're going to hop on over to where's that center cluster of the next set of 5 and go into that chain 1 space right above it for our next double crochet, chain 4, 2, 3, 4, and then double crochet. And if I hold it up here, you can see that's just lining right up on top of each other. Okay, so for row 5, basically the repeat is chain 2, the big V stitch with the chain 4, chain 2, and then double crochet in the next one right above that previous one. Now, obviously you'll have a lot more of those repeats when you're making row 5 of your full-size shawl, but because I'm just making a little swatch, I'm already here at the end. What we're watching for is when you've got just one set of clusters left at the end here of your previous row 4. That's when you know it's time to start the end of your row 5. So when you've got 6 single crochets remaining, we are going to chain 2, skip 3 of the single crochets, so that brings us right to that center cluster again. Double crochet in that chain 1 space, right above that cluster, like so, and then just stop right there. So we slip stitched over till we got into that first center cluster of our first set, worked our way up, and then when we get to the last set, we're going to finish with a double crochet right in the top of that stitch. And with that, we're ready to begin row 6. Now, rows 6 through 8 are just repeats of rows 2 through 4. So what would we do? We'd make another single crochet row, another cluster row, and then another single crochet row after that. And you'll just keep doing that for 28 rows. So the basic repeat is rows 5 through 8. So you can go back to the written pattern if you need help with that, or rewind the video. You're going to keep doing that for a total of 28 rows. So when you're finishing up your last repeat here, you'll be at the point I'm at right now, when that would be, let's see, be 28, 27, 26. This would be about row 25 for you. So you'd have 3 more rows left to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do those, and I'm going to go ahead and do them on camera so you can see how the whole thing finishes up. So let's do, next would be row 2 is where we're going to jump back to. So these should go pretty quick here right at the end. We do a chain 1, single crochet right in that first chain 2 space, single crochet right in that double crochet. There we are. We've got a chain 2 space again. We've got 2 single crochets there. Whoops. 1, 2. We're at a chain 4 space, so we work 5 single crochets in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got a chain 2 space, so we work 2 single crochets in there, and then pull up some more yarn because we're out of yarn. Whoops, there we go. And then you can see we're right here at the end, so we're just going to work a single crochet in the top of that double crochet right there. And then we've got a single crochet in that chain 2 space. As you'll recall, that's why we put that stitch marker in. That's our chain 2 space. And then a single crochet right in that marked stitch, because that's like the top of our double crochet. So there we go. Now we're ready to begin our next row 3 repeat. So we start with a chain 3, turn, like so, skip the next stitch and double crochet in the next stitch, so right on top of that previous double crochet. Remember, this is the stitch we put our marker in, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull that one up. We don't need that anymore. There we go. Then we skip 2 stitches and work our cluster stitches across our 5 single crochets. So there's do 1. I'm going to need some more yarn here. Let me pull up some more yarn. There we go. This stuff is really pretty. It's got a really interesting sort of wool look to it, but it turns out it has no wool in it. So you can get that look for this yarn if you, even if you have a wool allergy. So, all right, now that I've got some more yarn, we can get back to the crocheting here. There we are. So we've got our first cluster. We've got 4 more to go here. This is our last set of clusters, because this is like we're working row, what would be our row, our row 27. Yes, there we go. All right. Working on a cross, doing math as I go. All right, we're almost there. Got just a couple more to go here, and then we'll be all done with our clusters for our little mini shawl. And the reason I'm going ahead and finishing this off with you right now is because I really want to demonstrate the edging for this. It's got a really beautiful edging that I think really helps make the whole shawl pop. So after we've got our last 5 clusters there, then we're going to skip on over here and work a double crochet right in the top of that one right there. And then, excuse me, we don't have to do that. My bad. I'm sorry. After those last double crochet, that last set of clusters, then that's where we're ready to finish it off, because we are at that point already. So basically, we've got 3 stitches remaining here. We're going to work a double crochet, treble crochet 2 together. Remember, that's our special stitch. So we do that in the stitch and the marked stitch, which we should have marked that one up there, but we didn't. That's okay. Okay, and now we're ready for row 28, which is a row 4 repeat. So what we're going to do is chain 1, then we single crochet in the first stitch, then we chain 1, skip that first cluster and work in between the next 2, or well, between that one and the next one, chain 1, work between the next 2 clusters here. There we are. Chain 1, work between the next 2 clusters. Chain 1, work between the next 2 clusters. Chain 1, and here we are right at the end. We've got our marked stitch. Work a single crochet right in the top of that marked stitch, like so. And that is row 28. After that, you're ready to begin the edging, and the edging is worked in the round all the way around as one big row, but I've broken it up into different parts in the written pattern to make it a little bit easier to follow. So basically, we're going to start by turning and working right across row 28 for the first portion. We chain 1, single crochet in the first stitch, so right back in that last little one we made right there, like so. Then half double crochet in the chain 1 space, half double crochet in the next stitch, there we are, half double crochet in the next chain 1 space, half double crochet in the next stitch, and that brings us right back to, you can see the next stitch, or the next space here, the next chain 1 space is right on top of that center cluster. So in that chain 1 space, we're going to work a double crochet, followed by a picot and another double crochet. Now there's a few different ways to do picots. I'm going to show you my favorite way and the way I made them for this pattern. We start by chaining 3, 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to go right here into the back hump of that very first chain I just made with my hook and just work a slip stitch. And that is a picot. So then I yarn over and go back in that same chain 1 space and make another double crochet. You can see that's going to give us a really nice, that great pointed look at the tip of our shawl. Now after that, we need to work our way back down. So I'm going to half double crochet in the next stitch. Put a little bit more yarn here. There we go. Then half double crochet in the next chain 1 space. Half double crochet in the next stitch. Half double crochet in the next chain 1 space. There we go. And then single crochet in the last stitch. So that mirrors what we did there on the other side, like so. So that's the first portion of the edging. Then we go on to the next section. Now we're ready for the section that begins by working along the first side. That means we're going to work our way all the way back until we get to the top of our shawl. So here's the repeat for that. We're going to start with two single crochets in the side of the next cluster row. So the cluster row, you remember, ended with this stitch right here. So we're just going to go right around it, and you can work into the stitch with your hook, or you can go right around the post, whichever you prefer. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go on right around it right now. So we've got 2 single crochets in the side of that cluster row. Then I'm going to single crochet in the side of the next single crochet row. So for this one, you just see where the single crochets are. Get a couple loops above your hook there and make a single crochet. Then we work 2 single crochets in the side of the next double crochet row, where we've got that row with our V's and our double crochets. So we've got two single crochets worked in the side of that row. And then after that, we are going to work a single crochet in the same chain 1 space as the double crochet we just worked into. So what does that mean? That stitch we just worked around when we made those 2 single crochets, if we look here, you can see it's worked into that chain 1 space above that center cluster. We're going to put a single crochet right in that chain 1 space, like so. After that, we're going to picot again. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Go into that back hump of the first chain made and make a slip stitch. And there's your picot for right there. Then we single crochet in the next single crochet. So that's this one right here. Then we single crochet in the next chain space. Single crochet in the next stitch. Whoops, there we go. Single crochet in the next chain space. And then single crochet in the next stitch. There we go. Then we begin the repeat again. 2 single crochets in the side of the next cluster stitch row. Pull up some more yarn as needed here. There we go. Single crochet in the next side of the next single crochet row here. And then 2 single crochets around the next double crochet row. And then at this point, of course, if you're making your full-size shawl, you'll have lots more repeats where you do where to go here, where we've got the single crochet in the top of that cluster and a picot and work your way out and down. When you get, though, all the way to the end of your side, you'll end up here with 2 single crochets worked in the side of that last double crochet row. Then we're ready to begin the next section, which is called working along the top of the shawl or foundation chain. So we're going to start by finding that very first foundation chain we made right there and working 3 single crochets right into that one. That will help us turn the corner to work right along the top of our shawl. So this is where I like having worked into the back hump of the chains, because now I've got a really nice set of V's here to work my edging into. So I'm going to go into that very first chain I made there right by the slip stitch, like so. There we are. Get my yarn sort of straightened out there and work 3 single crochets. So there's 1, right back into that same chain for 2, and then 3. And you can see how that brought me right around the curve. After that, we are going to work right along the foundation chain. And you can make a decision here. You can work into the chain spaces, or you can work into the individual chains. But there's 4 chains skipped in between each of these stitches, so you need to have 4 stitches there. I went back and forth and tried a couple different ways, and I discovered I actually really liked the look when I worked into the individual chains, but I would encourage you to make a few stitches of each and see what you like to do. Working into the individual chains does take more time, as you can imagine. It's just like working into the chains any other time on a pattern, so you have to take your time and go into each individual one. So you can try, like I say, try both, see which you prefer, for sure. But if you decide to just work into those chain spaces, then make sure you work 4 single crochets into each one of those chain spaces. Again, it's just personal preference. Now, after you've worked into each of those chains, or around each of them, so to speak, then you want to make sure, of course, too, to work into the chains that have a stitch worked into them, like so. So you're just working into both parts of that stitch. So basically, you're just single crocheting into each one of these chains all the way across, and then you're ready to begin the last side. So I'm going to go ahead and keep working into my chains, and I will see you when we're ready to begin working along the final side for the edging. Okay, so for the sake of time, I went ahead and crocheted around these ones so you can see just a little comparison there of how they look when you work into the chain versus around the chain. Again, whatever you prefer. But after you've worked all your way across that beginning foundation chain here, you'll get to this point. And remember that other marked stitch, the 5th one? That is going to be our final foundation chain for the purposes of this. So I wanted to point out here, I've got this section here and that 5th marked chain at our beginning foundation chain. So right here, we can work into or around the next 4 chains. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then when we've got that marked chain, that's where we're going to work 3 single crochets. So we want to work 3 single crochets right into that one right there. And that's going to get us around the curve to work our final side. So there's 1, and 2, and 3. And now we can go ahead and take that stitch marker out. We are done with it. And we are done with the one after that too, that marked the top of that double crochet, so to speak, with our little chains there. There we go. All right, now we're ready to begin working along that final side. So for our repeat here, we're going to start with 2 single crochets in the next side of the next double crochet row. So this one right here, just work 2 single crochets right around there. 1 and 2. Then we single crochet in the side of the next single crochet row. 2 single crochets around the side of the next cluster row. 1, 2. Okay, so that brings us to where we have those slip stitches. Now you can work back into those slip stitches, or you can work into the stitches and chain 1 spaces underneath. I went back and forth again on which look I liked best, and I found that I just liked working into the stitches underneath best. So we're going to ignore that slip stitch, and we're going to go into that single crochet that it's made into, and work a single crochet there. Then we single crochet in that chain 1 space, go right on around the slip stitch there, 2. Then in the next stitch, 3. The next chain 1 space, 4. The next stitch, 5, like so. Then we're going to make a picot. 1, 2, 3. Slip stitch in that 3rd chain from the hook. There we are. Then we single crochet in the next chain 1 space right there. And you can see that's brought us back to that center cluster right there. So after that, we're ready to begin our repeat again with 2 single crochets in the side of the next double crochet row, a single crochet in the side of the next single crochet row, 2 single crochets in the side of the next cluster row, and then we would be back at those slip stitches and we'd work there. But again, because it's our tiny little shawl, I'm right back here at the beginning. So at this point, I can go ahead and break my yarn and sew it to that first stitch or join with a slip stitch. Whichever one you prefer. I prefer the look of breaking the yarn and using my needle to go around there. I call it a seamless join, and I do have tutorials for that on the channel. But if you prefer to do it just the kind of the standard way, you can just slip stitch and finish off from there. So there we have our finished little swatch, and let's pull up the original. Okay, so here we have the finished shawl, and you can see here's our repeats along the last side with our picots, and then finally, like I say, we end up joined to that very first single crochet we made. And then of course, since it was worked top down, we can turn it around and see just how pretty that red heart color scape looks in this pattern. You've got picots all along both sides, and you've got your beautiful shell stitches. Now I did block this out. Again, go to the link in the description and you will find the dimensions that I blocked it out to, so you can block it out yourself and kind of pull those sides out a little straighter. They want to curve a little bit, and I think that's pretty too, but kind of pull them out where you're blocking, and then it'll have just a really nice gentle curve. And that's how you make the Tuscan Moon Shawl. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video does help you. If it does, please give us a like, give us a comment, let us know what you think, and please don't forget to subscribe to the Moogly channel. Have a great day.